Good morning, everyone. You know, we have a crowded house. It's standing room only. Lean Six Sigma is not one of those, ooh, yeah, I want to go see that presentation. But it's very useful for your business and your unit. So it's on the more serious side of the presentations this week. So let's go ahead and get started. Oh, by the way, do you all know who I am? Okay. I'm Dr. Yvonne Catino. I work in the Office of Human Resources. I do learning and organizational development, as well as performance management and discipline and grievances for the university. Okay. Objectives. There's just 3 things I want you to take away today, because this is the first in a series on Lean Six Sigma. The first is identify foundational concepts. We do have a lot to cover here today. So again, it's just the 30,000-foot level. We want to establish a common language for transformation. With budget cuts going across the state, we're a public university, we have to make do with less, right? And so Lean Six Sigma is a tool we can use to maximize what we have available. And then lastly, recognize where and how Lean Six Sigma can be used in your unit. All right. How many people know what a sigma is? Okay, a handful. Who wants to give a shout out at what a sigma is? Right, it's a standard deviation, and it's one standard deviation. One standard deviation, or 2 standard deviations, is approximately 308 defects per million opportunities. What does that mean? That means, let's take a look at it from a student perspective. For every student interaction the university has, you have that many defects per million opportunities. We'd probably want to reduce that, right? So that's how we come to Six Sigma, 3.4 defects. And defects could mean a lot of different things. In a service organization like the university, we're talking about interactions in this case. Opportunities. Students go through the application process. Students go through the registration process. How you get your reports on how your staff is doing. How many defects, interactions are we having? Six Sigma was created at Motorola years ago, but it was popularized by Jack Welch. We've all heard of Jack Welch, right? Yes? Okay, good. He made this part of his business strategy. And we all know how fast GE grew their profits. Oops. There we go. And how fast they grew their product lines, etc. While we're not a GE, we're a university. But we can take some of those concepts and apply them to the processes here that we have. Now, that's kind of just a high level on the background for Six Sigma. Then there's Lean Six Sigma, or lean quality, as they say. I'm not going to go through these, folks, because you have it there. You can read it after the session. But it goes all the way back to Henry Ford when it comes to lean quality. And it was based in Toyota and the Toyota production system in the 80s. All right. Now we're going to get into the good stuff. So this researcher, James Womack from MIT, worked with Toyota. And they were trying to figure out ways to increase revenue, maximize customer value, those sorts of things, objectives. But they were having problems with quality, and this was in the 80s. So Dr. Womack put together this team, and they came up with these, well, it's a 5-step process, but it addresses 3 core areas: people, purpose, process, and people. And it all focuses on quality. So Six Sigma was focused on process and minimizing defects. Lean Six Sigma focuses on eliminating waste and streamlining the process. So when you combine Lean plus Six Sigma, you're creating a problem-solving methodology to address process issues and quality with your customer. Here are the core concepts for Lean Six Sigma. It's always about the customer. As a service organization, our students are our customers. What other customers do we have? Do we even have other customers? Who said yes? I'm sorry? Employers, yep. Who else? Parents, donors. I'm sorry? I'm sorry? Colleagues, exactly. A lot of people forget that one piece, that David Margulies, he's a customer. He works at Kane. I'm in HR. He's a customer to me. We forget that connection because we sometimes think, oh, he's an employee, he's just coming in. But he's a customer coming for service and human resources. Process focus. With Lean Six Sigma, it's all about the waste. It's all about too many steps, too many people that might be involved, too many locations. Those are just some examples to keep in mind as we go through this. And then lastly, a lean culture. A respectful, interactive culture of process ownership. I encourage my staff to own their process. And when I say by own the process, meaning procedures make up a process. And they may be responsible for the procedures, so they're also responsible for that part of the process. And when you push down that level of accountability to folks, they're the best ones to tell you where the waste is. And we're going to talk about that. So, high level. Here are some types of Lean Six Sigma projects. Quick wins, right here. That's pretty much a simple problem you're having with the process. You identify it and you move forward. Process improvement. This is an incremental reduction of defects, cycle time, or cost. In a continuous learning environment like a university, you should always be looking to improve your processes, always. But to do that, you need to have key performance indicators, KPIs, and/or metrics. Sorry, I'm not used to this clicker. Process redesign. I'm skipping this middle one, process design. It's not one we see a lot at the university. It's really when you're implementing, like a new law goes into effect on financial aid. Let's just say that happens hypothetically. We don't have anything to address it. That's when you're going to use process design. But for us, the majority fall between quick win process and process redesign. Infrastructure implementation is much more advanced. It's usually when you're implementing an organization-wide technology, like Oracle, or let's say we all move to Outlook Exchange. That's an infrastructure implementation example. Okay, are we good so far? Yes? No? Maybe? Okay. So I love this process slide because we all think we know what process is. What you think it is, nice and tight. What it really is, what it should be, and what it could be. And even the what it could be, that might be your ultimate goal. So you may start off at what it really is. Oops. Here. And then maybe you go through 3 or 4 iterations at this step to get it here. And that's ultimately what you want. Okay, so here's a summary. Lean Six Sigma. It's a method of problem solving. It's not just a philosophy on problem solving, but it's also a goal. Because you're going to have metrics involved, you're going to have key performance indicators involved. And so it's a continuous learning cycle. You're always upping the goal. It increases revenue. Now, granted, we're a nonprofit university, but it increases revenue so that perhaps maybe we can add that extra staff person to take on additional responsibilities in the unit. Increases customer satisfaction, increases efficiency and effectiveness. Now, that's the one that most people associate with Lean Six Sigma. You become more efficient. That's just one. The way Lean Six Sigma works in implementing it correctly, you get all these others, in addition to decreasing cost and developing staff. Now, this last one, developing staff, a lot of people don't normally associate with Lean Six Sigma. Why do you think that is? Lean Six Sigma, quality, you're eliminating waste, it's a process tool. Why do you think, go ahead. Or service development in our case. But it could be product too, I guess, if you're having course offerings from that perspective. New majors, sure, that would be considered a product. But how else might developing people play into the Lean Six Sigma process? You are going to engage people that are at the source of the process. They're the ones who are best equipped to tell you what's working and what's not. And if they have an idea on a process change, as a supervisor, it's worth looking at. Now, you may not be able to do it, might not be cost effective for whatever reason, but it's the engagement of staff in the process that increases morale, because they feel heard. They feel not just another person at the university. They also understand their place in the system. And that's tied to employee engagement. And we want that. Okay, now, each one of these on the left matches up with one of these. So increase revenue. How do you do that? You strip away waste. Developing staff. How do you do that? Maximizing customer value. Customer service. Method of problem solving. Strips away waste. Okay, M&Ms. I call it the M&Ms because it's an easy acronym. Most people like M&Ms, whether you're a peanut person or a plain, I don't know. But there's MUDA, which is waste. There's MURA, which is a strain or overburden, and that's usually during our busy times. Maybe 2 weeks before the start of a semester with registration. That might be a MURA period. MURI, where demand exceeds capacity. That's mostly for manufacturing. It may apply in some instances here. If you find one as we work through this, I welcome you to raise your hand and point it out. Okay, MUDA's the big one for us. Actually, MUDA and MURA. So, MUDA, which is Japanese, by the way, 8 kinds. Errors, defects. In the scope of a service organization, a defect would be an error. It could be a bad interaction with a student, could be a bad interaction with a parent. Those are considered errors. Waiting, motion, overprocessing. Overprocessing is like duplicate checking, just to make sure you got it right. So what is it about that process that's causing you to have it do it twice? Non-utilized talent, that's actually a biggie, and we're going to talk about that. Overestimation. I find this happens actually a lot. Let's take professional development days, for example. It's hard to estimate how many people are going to attend your session, right? Because you don't have to register. So, how many sets of printouts do I make? That's paper, that's the use of the copier. This is how my mind works. I start thinking about these things. Do I print 100? I'm in Wilkins Theatre. Do I really think 100 are going to attend? Probably not. Maybe 50. Do I print 50? Am I going to have 20 people attend? Then I've got 30 extra sets of wasted paper and resources. That's overestimation. Inventory. Inventory could be anything from pens and pencils to textbooks to anything extra. Transportation. What do you think transportation means in terms of waste at a university? Anyone? Yes, sir. Wasted motion, is that what I heard? Movement. So transportation is, let me think of an example. We do something in human resources, has to go over to Kane Hall. Are we going to walk it over? Can we email it? Can we scan it and email it? There's lots of other avenues than taking the time from, let's say me, taking the 5-10 minutes to walk over to Kane Hall, drop it off, and come back. That's 20 minutes. when I might have been able to send it in an email marked urgent, if that's the case, and have that 20 minutes more to work on another project. That's transportation. Here I've highlighted some examples to get you all start thinking about the areas. So errors, defects, data entry. A lot of errors in data entry causes people to do double checking. So you create an error here in the system. Now this person down here who's relying on that information has to double check and go back to the original source. Error gets passed downstream. Waiting, computer downtime, waiting for approvals. I'll give you an example, since I do performance management. When we send out notices for managers and supervisors to do their evaluations for staff, we have deadlines. So in HR, what are we doing? We're waiting, and we're waiting. And so when managers and supervisors submit the evaluations late, that makes us late in getting them to the president. So it bottlenecks the system, the waiting piece. Motion, we just talked a little bit, that's also related to transportation. Overprocessing, overestimating, inventory. Now, inventory, I'll also mention something called batch processing. And I was going to include a video here on this to break it up, but wasn't sure how many folks would handle that, so I'm just going to briefly talk about it. Batch processing is where you have, let's say you're doing a mailing to students, prospective students. You've got, here's your mailing list, here's all your letters, here's all your envelopes. So batch processing might be, okay, you're folding all the letters first, and then you're stuffing the envelopes. Instead of taking the list, labeling the envelope, folding the letter, and putting it in. You're touching it once all the way through the process. They've actually done multiple studies and found that batch processing really doesn't work when it comes to efficiencies. Okay, back to waste. All right, I love this map up here. Process before Lean Six Sigma, and then the process after. I want you to remember this image, because we're going to talk about it in a little bit. That's the way we've always done it. How many of you have heard that recently? That line doesn't live here anymore. With the rollout of Lean Six Sigma today, you're part of the solution or you're part of the problem. It goes back to accountability and engagement for staff being part of the process. It goes back to being transparent, and being transparent with your staff is what I mean. Let me give you an example. I have a new hire. He started Monday. And in the interview process, I made it pretty clear to him, the first part of your job's not going to be fun. I was honest. I said, it's just not going to be fun. You're going to have a learning curve. You're going to have to do a lot of administrative work. But the dessert is at the end. There's going to be good stuff along the way. So you just got to make it through that learning curve before you get to the good stuff. That transparency builds trust. And that's what employees want from their managers. They want to trust you. So being as transparent as possible is essential in breaking that's the way we've always done it. Sometimes if you're giving an employee a project, telling them the why behind it enhances that trust factor and that transparency factor. Okay. Sipoc, you say. Who knows what Sipoc is? Okay. It is suppliers, inputs, process, outputs, and customers. I pulled this example of a car purchasing process, and I also put this letter or number 1 up here as a reference. All the key steps will have a number up there from now to the rest of the slide deck. The very first thing you do, actually I'm going to ask for a live example. Who has a process they want to work on? Anybody? Your processes are knocking it out of the park? Really? There's one. Transfer. So tell me a little bit of background about that.
When students are coming from community college to university, there's a lot of course substitution, manual course substitution, paperwork you have to do. If you're an internal student, transfer of major. There's just a lot of paperwork, a lot of.
Here, come on up here. I think this is on. Is this on, Mickey? I think it's on.
Hello.
Perfect. And your name is?
Professor Denise Anderson, School of Design.
Hi, Denise.
Hi.
Okay, so we're going to talk about transfer applications.
Yes, transfer applications.
Okay, so your suppliers. Who are your suppliers?
Students.
Okay, students are one. The people who process.
People who process, transfer evaluation office.
The people who approve.
Transfer admissions, people approve. The managing director of the department that has to sign off on paperwork.
So you've got 5 right there. 5 suppliers. Okay, inputs. You've got the application itself, yes?
Well, in the School of Design, we have a process where we have to review portfolios. So there's a slide room, which all of the performing arts, we all have to review the creative work. So we have to review the creative work. We have to receive the transcripts from the transfer admissions office.
Okay, so the transfer admissions would also be a supplier.
Yes, they're a supplier.
So the input are the transfer transcripts, the portfolio.
The acquiring of the student ID number, which is brand new, in order to review their program evaluations. Then you have to create a course, a guide sheet for the student of the transfer and courses that you will substitute. Then there's the course substitution form, which is all manually done. You have to pick and choose courses that you would consider to transfer into the program. And then there could be a change of major form that's...
So 6 forms.
Oh, and there's probably something else I'm not thinking of.
You're right, but we're talking high level.
Absolutely.
So you've got about 6 suppliers, you've got 6 inputs. And then you have the process itself. Most folks go directly here to process. They forget to include the suppliers in the process. They forget to include the inputs in the process. So if you're forgetting those first 2 steps, what's going to happen to your process? It's going to be incomplete. It's going to have been created in a silo. if you're creating a process in a silo, are you really maximizing the customer value, the customer experience, the student experience? No. Okay, Denise. So then you have your process of actually working through all those, correct?
Yeah, if I had to go through it, half the room would clear out. Yeah.
We won't go there.
Okay.
But, so you can see, let's just say she's got 6 major steps in her process. And then you have outputs. So let's briefly talk about your outputs.
So the output is an email to the transfer evaluation office with the forms of the courses and the things that we consider to substitute. Then there's an email to the student that talks about all of the things that we will, a welcome letter, substitution form, their course guide sheet, all the things that we were talking about. And then,
Is there any notification to the department? Or a chair, advisor?
yeah, there could be, yes, an advisor change, there could be a notice to the administrator, the head of the department that has to do some other additional process to get the change of major form. Again, I can't do it all, so there's a number of other people that need to
Right.
be involved in order to do this.
So let's say high level if you got 4 or 5 documents. Okay, so you've got 6, 6, 5, 6. For ultimately, who's your customer?
Student.
Exactly. All that back work is to serve the student.
Yeah, and it's not a good process because the student's frustrated, they don't fully understand, and it's back and forth,
Exactly.
emails back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
Exactly.
Right.
And so what Lean Six Sigma can do for you is, now we've just, on a high level, did your Sipoc map, right? Now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of each of the suppliers, the inputs, the process, the outputs, and the customer through this problem-solving process, okay? And we're going to use your example because it was perfect, so feel free to pop in. It was a great example, really. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, let's give her a hand because that was a great example. All right, so problem solving the process. The first thing is you have to define the problem. Denise said she's got a problem with this process. It's frustrating for the student. Okay, there's no value there. Measure and map current and ideal process, gather data. Analyze the map and the data. You're going to implement the selected solution and then control the solution with maintenance. And I call this facts for fixes. And that's a great phrase because everything in Lean Six Sigma deals in data. Hard numbers, facts. Okay, so let's get started. Define. Denise, you've got 4 things you need to define for your problem. They're each going to be about a sentence long. They don't have to be super long. A lot of people think, oh gosh, I have to create 5 paragraphs to address this statement of the problem. For Lean Six Sigma, remember, you're eliminating the waste, you're streamlining, it needs to be concise. So you're going to have 4 sentences. Statement of the problem, then where you want to be. So Denise said the students are frustrated. There's something called the voice of the customer, and we may want to call it the voice of the student. And it's an evaluation tool that students can use to evaluate the service maybe they've received in that transfer process. You would have to create a baseline because you don't have one now, which is fine. So that baseline number, your goal may be to create a baseline voice of the student metric as well as improve satisfaction. That could be a goal for you. You would map your current process You would also do a spaghetti map. Remember that little squirrely thing where I said, remember this image? That looks like what we call a spaghetti map. And then the customer requirements outcome. Your outcome is, once you get a baseline of your voice of the student, may be to increase the voice of the student response by 10% over next year. But in your case, you'll have to establish a baseline, which I think a lot of folks will have to do. But that's okay, that's a good start. Here's your spaghetti map. On a campus as large as ours, we have folks obviously scattered. Denise, where are you in Green Lane? Okay. And admissions is in Kane Hall, and human resources is in admin building. Any other buildings where people reside that participate in the process? No, just mainly those three? Okay. So on a spaghetti map, you would take your process. Okay, it starts here in Green Lane, it goes over to Kane Hall, then it might come over to HR, gets pushed back over to Green Lane. So you can see how if you have multiple buildings you have to work, people in multiple buildings across campus, it's time consuming, it increases your wait time, and then it delays the response to the student. Measure. So again, there's my step 3. Step 2 was define after Sipoc. Step 3 is measure. As a university, you collect data, So let's collect some data, perhaps go back and ask some students. We can create a voice of student evaluation survey, ask them about their experience. Then you create a baseline, you have somewhere to go. The key part is making sure your data is reliable. And as I mentioned here, you'd create baseline data in that example. Okay, step 4. You all have this data now. What are you going to do with it? Well, you're going to analyze it. But you're going to analyze it for more than just a root cause. You're going to ask the 5 whys. I've introduced the 5 whys before in a supervisor-manager presentation. On average, it takes asking the question why 5 times to get to a root cause. A lot of folks will go ahead and say, oh, yep, that's the answer. But that's a surface answer. Is it really? Well, why is that? Then you dig a little deeper and you pull back a layer. Then you dig a little deeper and you pull back a layer. So on average, it's about 5 times you have to ask the word why to get to a root cause. Could take 2 or 3 times, could take 7 times. All depends upon how complex your problem is. At this stage, you're going to start brainstorming for ways to fix the process. After you look at the data, you're going to go, okay, here's where we're at. We know where we want to be. How do we get there? So you're going to create an ideal map. That ideal map is tied to your goal that you created in step 2. Step 5, this is where you start planning. You start planning your solution, designing the solution. We call it future state. You take your current map that you did in step 2, your ideal map that you created in step 4, and ultimately you're going to create a hybrid. Because an ideal is just that, it's an ideal. It's an ideal. and it's called a hybrid because you have constraints. What might some constraints be in your process, Denise? Money, maybe to buy a system, time, people resources. So these are all constraints you have to think about when you're building out your ideal map. You'll ultimately select a solution. And when you select the solution, then you need to be able to create a measurement. How are you going to know the solution was working? And then 6, control. You want to trust but verify. We're going to have another session coming up in the next couple of months as a lunch and learn called a systems thinking primer. I mentioned a feedback loop here because you need that in order to have a continuous learning cycle. A feedback loop is part of systems thinking, and we'll have that and announce that at a later date. We can go into more detail about that, but for now, just know that you need this feedback loop to know how the process is working. It almost becomes an iterative process. Find a solution, you're going to implement it, you're going to measure it and track it, and if it's not working, you tweak it. Okay, that didn't work. We need to adjust the dial over here to increase or decrease time over here. Great, that worked. That made our measurement come down or our measurement go up. And then lastly, when we did the EPAR implementation, I'll use that as an example. I kept a log of changes we made to processes. Why did I do that? Why would I keep a log of issues we ran into and how we resolved them? Exactly. It provides qualitative data that we can apply to another process that we have to implement for performance management. Well, we know this worked for X, Y, and Z. So we can take that knowledge and apply it to another similar situation. It worked here, it may work here, it may not, but we know that it worked here. And then I'm taking us back to this slide because, so we've gone over define, measure, analyze, implement, and control. We have lots of opportunities here to push the envelope, as they say, in improving processes. Now, Denise, are you the leader of that group for the transfer applications? Okay, if you're the leader, you own the process. If you're the leader, it's your problem. If it's your problem, the first thing you're going to want to do is gain supervisor input and their support. You want to tap into unfamiliar talent. There's a lot of folks on this campus that have skills that are just dying. And we need to tap into that. How do we do that? Talent profiles. It's something HR is working on building out. If you have a process and you want to put together a team to work, a cross-functional team to work on your process, let's go back to Denise's example. She had 5 or 6 suppliers, right? You're going to want one of each of those on your team. Why? Buy in and help solve the problem. Exactly. They can provide to you firsthand experience of what it's like, right? You want that. So the talent profiles. As I said, we're in the process of building those out. That's where people will say, I have skills in X, Y, and Z, and I can contribute on X, Y, and Z. Great. If they fall into one of Denise's supplier roles, I can give her a list from our database. Here are some people who have skill sets in the area that you're looking for. You ideally want about 5 or less on your team. If you go bigger than 5, it gets cumbersome. So you want to select 5 critical areas of your suppliers. All the suppliers are important, but ultimately, students, number one, you're going to want a student in on the process, right? You're going to want the people who process it in on the process. So you're going to start prioritizing the suppliers of who you're going to include on your team. Now, tips for getting started. I want to make sure we have enough time. First thing, you're going to assemble your team. We talked about that. The second thing is your grand strategy. A lot of people think, oh, my process has to be perfect. Well, we strive to be perfect, right? Here's perfection, we make it here. And then we change the goal and we get a little bit higher. You need to throw out the grand strategy of perfection out the window. Start with what you have right now. Just put your stake in the ground and go, yep, I'm going to tackle this process. I'm going to get some data, and I'm going to move it forward. Seize a crisis as the impetus for change. That's always perfect. That's a great opportunity to get started on Lean Six Sigma. Map your process, including the spaghetti charts. So Sipoc mapping is very useful, but you cannot forget the spaghetti maps. A lot of people do. And the spaghetti maps address the transportation and the motion pieces of waste. You want to demand immediate results. Now, immediate, if you implement a process today and say you want results by tomorrow, okay, that's a little unrealistic. A little unrealistic. You want to be able to project a time period of when you can expect results. So once you have momentum on your process, Denise, what's a complementary process that works in with the transfer? Perfect. So if you know transfer applications are your #1 problem right now, you start working on that. And then once you get that ball rolling and in a continuous cycle, then you pick an adjacent process, you start working on that one. And then they start working synchronous, I can't say the word, thank you. Thank you. All right, so this is ultimately what you're building, the Lean Transformation Framework. It starts at the bottom, which is here where we're introducing the concepts. We are creating a mindset of a way to think. Then you have process improvement, which we just went through the 6 steps. Capability development, that's the part about developing your people. Leader behaviors, we addressed that last professional development days with navigating whitewater, developing your leadership skills. And then ultimately, value-driven purpose. And the value-driven purpose is always the student. All right. As we start wrapping up and winding down, I want to encourage lean thinking. And I love this quote. I was an old mentor of mine, said it to me. 2 steps forward and 1 step backward is okay, but no steps forward is not okay. That's what makes Lean Six Sigma so successful, because the focus is on continuous improvement. So long as you keep making 2 steps, you're moving forward. And that's what we want. Now, here's a couple of things. Utilize policy deployment. One of the things that I started when I first came to Kane was something called an office standards template. And we had people coming late quite often. So I created this template. What happened to our discipline for attendance? It went down because we had a policy in place to address it. Make all performance measures transparent and measurable. Development plans, they should either have a deliverable on them, i.e. attend a conference, create a new database for X, Y, and Z. What else? Take a lynda.com course by such and such date and apply 1 tool from that session by such and such. Teach lean thinking and skills to all staff. Managers and supervisors need to push that thinking down to the staff. Ask them for the solutions. You're coming to me with a problem. How do you think we should solve it? Why do you think we should solve it that way? And then, this is important. Build a business case to right-size your tools instead of patching them. It's very easy to work in a silo. Okay, I need this for my group. But maybe, let's just say admissions. Admissions needs X, Y, and Z for their group. But maybe OCIS needs something like that for their group too. So they've bought a patch, OCIS might have bought a different patch, HR might have bought a patch, College of Business might have bought a patch to solve whatever their problem is. There's no efficiency in that. There's no cost savings in that. We have another lunch and learn coming up on how to write a business case for the University Planning Council for funding for projects. It's tied to this. Knowing what to ask for, how to ask for it, and justifying the cost with real data boosts your case. Okay, so there's that perfection word. We always strive for it. That's the flow for maximizing value that we talked about. And then I've got a couple of slides of takeaways. I'm not going to go over them. I'll let you take or read at them after. Does anybody have any questions? I know we covered a lot. Ma'am. Uh-huh. See, and that's, yeah, no. Right. And it depends on the problem. You know, that's true. I've worked with major manufacturers before I came to Kane. Honeywell, Boston Scientific, Medtronic, lots of big firms. I've never had a process take a year to do. It is. And you have different crises, you know, for patients and such. Yes. Lean Six Sigma has actually been in academia for about 7 years. It's been used at Emory, University of Southern California, lots of big school systems, both public and private. It works. It really works, and it delivers. So I strongly encourage you to employ these tools in your unit. Anybody else have questions? Okay. Well, I'm available if you have a process that you'd like to work on. I'm here in HR to help you do that. Just send me an email like Denise. If you really want to get started on this, we can really get going on it, create a voice of the student study, and get some baseline data going. Okay? Anybody else? Last time. Questions, comments? No? Okay. Thank you so much for coming.